Welcome everybody to the Senate and House Appropriations and Senate Budget and Taxation Committee Capital Budget Subcommittee. We're meeting for the purpose of capital budget hearings. First, I wanted to recognize the subcommittee chair, Ben Barnes, Capital Budget Subcommittee Chair, and Vice Chair Mark Deng. Also, we're joined by the Senate President, Senate President Bill Ferguson. Welcome, Mr. President. Before I turn it over to start with the public school construction, Chairman Barnes, do you have any opening comments?
No, I would just note we're joined by Chair McIntosh today. So welcome, Chair McIntosh. With that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll first start with the budget analysis from Laura Hyde. Ms. Hyde.
Thank you very much. All right, we're starting on page 1. This is the grant and loan capital program. And as you can see in the 2022 requests, public school construction program receives $250 million, Built to Learn Fund $520 million, supplemental capital grant program $40 million, public school safety grant $10 million, aging schools program $6.1 million, non-public aging schools $3.5 million, and non-public school security $3.5 million. For a total of $833.1 million. If you look on page 2, this shows the fund sources for this request. In 2022, PAYGO does not receive any, is not involved in this request, but it is GO bonds for $248.1 million, bond premiums for $65 million, and revenue bonds for $520 million. If you look at Exhibit 3, this is on page 7. This is new school construction source funding by source. You can see in the 2022 budget, 520 in this budget is for revenue bonds and 313 is for GO bonds. The governor's plan for school construction funding provides a total of $833.1 million from all sources in fiscal 2022. If you look on page 8, this is the governor's proposed budget. You can see that this shows the variance in the CIP in this budget. This is excluding revenue bonds. This funding level is less than what was programmed or anticipated in the fiscal 22 budget and through the 5-year CIP, which for fiscal 22 is expected to be $280 million for the public school construction program. This reduced funding of the public school construction program continues through fiscal 2026 and totals $284 million less than expected. The Healthy School Facilities Fund in this budget is also at the $30 million mandated by Chapter 20, but was not included in fiscal 2022. If you look at Exhibit 6, this is on page 10. This shows the public school construction program funding through the 100% recommendations. And if you scroll down to page 11, you can see that with the 100% recommendation, this is $250 million. The 75% is $210 million for a total of 36% of the total request. You look at Exhibit 7, it's on page 12, Enrollment Growth and Relocatable Classroom Supplemental Grant Program. The fiscal 2022 budget provides the mandated $40 million for the EGRC supplemental grant program to be allocated through the funding formula. In fiscal 2022, implementation of Chapter 20 reduces the 5-year average relocatable classrooms from 300 to 250 for eligibility for EGRC funding. Under this revised formula, Anne Arundel, Baltimore, Frederick, Howard, Montgomery, and Prince George's counties receive EGRC supplemental grants in fiscal 2022. You look at Exhibit 8, this is the Aging Schools Program. In fiscal 22, the capital budget funds the Aging Schools Program at the same level as previous years, which is $6.1 million in GO bond funding, and these amounts are mandated as part of the grant distribution. You look at Exhibit 9 on page 14, this is the Healthy School Facilities Fund. The governor's fiscal 22 budget does not allocate funding for HSFF because as part of Chapter 15 of 2018, this program was scheduled to terminate after fiscal 2021. Chapter 20 extended the program to just fiscal 2024. but the veto of Chapter 36 delayed Chapter 20 implementation, and therefore funding was not mandated in fiscal 2022. In fiscal 2021, this program received $30 million in PAYGO funds in the operating budget. However, due to IAC's concern that general funds might be reduced as a result of the pandemic, the agency has not allocated these funds to local school systems, but expects to start that process in May 2021, with grants distributed by July 2021. This fund currently has a balance of $4.3 million, which should be added to the upcoming program allocation. You look on page 15. This explains the Public School Safety Grant Program, which received $10 million in PAYGO funds in fiscal 2020. However, due to an accidental overexpenditure of school safety grant funds in the Maryland Center for School Safety and a request to cut expenditures due to the pandemic, MSDE transferred $2.4 million from this fund to MCSS in December 2019 and reverted the remaining $7.6 million in the Board of Public Works cuts in May. In fiscal 2021, this program receives $10 million in GO bonds, which IAC anticipates combining with the fiscal 22 allowance for an allocation in May 2021. The Department of Legislative Services notes that as with the other school security grant improvement program, the funding source for this program will change starting in fiscal 22, which means that eligible projects will now require a 15-year lifespan to meet GO bond requirements. So with $10 million in fiscal 21 general funds to be awarded at the end of the fiscal year and the 15-year useful life limitations using GO bonds to support the program, DLS recommends reducing the bond funding for this program in fiscal 22 by $5 million and reprogramming these funds for other school construction needs, and also transferring this program to be administered by MCSS. You look at Exhibit 10. This is on page 16. This is the non-public school security improvement program, which is funded starting in fiscal 22 with GO bonds. This chart shows the fiscal 2020 allocation, which was approximately $3.6 million. Look on, this is page 17, Exhibit 11. These are project grants by type. And as with the Public School Safety Grant Program, DLS notes that this funding, the projects will be eligible for this program will now require a 15-year lifespan to meet GO bond requirements. And DLS also recommends that this grant program be cut by $1.5 million and that it be transferred to MCSS. You look on page 19, this is Exhibit 12. This is the DeGrange Non-Public Aging Schools Grant Program. This program distributed in fiscal 2020 $3.1 million for a total of 184 projects. You look at Exhibit 13, this is on the Build to Learn Act of 2020. This shows the fiscal 22 through 27 allocations for this program. In March 2020, the General Assembly passed the Build to Learn Act, which was enacted into law as Chapter 20. However, the law was contingent on the enactment of the Blueprint for Maryland's future implementation. And in February 21, the General Assembly override the veto, which means that Chapter 20 immediately takes effect, although funding mandates do not apply to fiscal 2022. This chart shows that the total in revenue bonds over time is $2.2 billion. GO bonds, $80 million. GO bonds or general funds, $440 million. The Healthy School Facilities Fund, $110 million. And $500 million in special funds to be transferred from the Education Trust Fund for a total of $3.2 billion. You look on page, this is Exhibit 14 on page 22. This is the allocation of the MSA bond proceeds out of Chapter 20. Chapter 20 authorizes the Maryland Stadium Authority to issue bonds to finance public school construction projects beginning January 2021. Before issuing bonds, MSA must obtain approval of the BPW for the aggregate amount of the proposed bond issue. And this is the allocation to the school systems as designated in Chapter 20. You look at Exhibit 15. This is on page 24. These are contingency fund balances. And this is a report that's submitted by IAC on a quarterly basis. And although this report contains a lot of detailed information, DLS recommends that IAC clearly identify the balance in the unreserved statewide contingency account, as well as clearly present EGRC supplemental grant program and PCSP contingency balances by fiscal year and local school system in future quarterly reports. If you look on page 26, these are the GO bond recommended actions. This includes the change in the non-public school security improvements program of $1.5 million, as well as the public school safety grant program for a cut of $5 million. And then Appendix 1 shows public school construction funding from 2017 through fiscal 2017 through fiscal 2021. This concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Hyde, for that very thoughtful and thorough analysis. Is there any questions for Ms. Hyde? I don't see any. I just want to remind everyone that Chairman Peters will be on as soon as he's done with his bill hearings. And with that, I don't see any questions. We'll now turn to the Superintendent of Maryland, of the Maryland State Department of Education, the Honorable Karen Salmon, as well as Robert Gorell, who's Executive Director, Interagency on School Construction. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Good afternoon, Senator Zucker. It's good to see you again, and also Chairman Barnes, and look forward to seeing Chairman Peters when he comes. And also good afternoon to all the members of the committee. I am Karen Salmon, State Superintendent of Schools, and I'm Chair of the Interagency Commission on School Construction. I'd like to thank Laura for the analysis on very complicated topics. Also with me today is Bob Gorell, who is the Executive Director of the IAC, and also Kim Spivey, who's the Deputy Director of Administration of the IAC. The IAC continues to work diligently to meet our statutory requirements, to streamline our processes, and to prepare for additional funding and programmatic changes. The statewide facilities assessment is underway, and we expect the completion of the boots on the ground assessments in July. This will allow the work group on the assessment of funding on school facilities to complete its work in determining how the assessment should be used in funding public school capital projects. The IAC continues to administer a number of programs, including the Capital Improvement Program, the Healthy School Facility Fund, the School Safety Grant Program, and the Aging Schools Program. With the recent enactment of the Built to Learn Act of 2020, the IAC is hard at work to implement all of the provisions in the bill. We have a lot of work to do, and we'll continue working every day to help ensure that every student in Maryland has an educationally sufficient learning environment. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Gorell to respond to the analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Salmon. Hello, members. In the analysis, DLS is recommending that the School Safety Grant Program and the Non-Public School Safety Grant Program be administered by the Maryland Center for School Safety. IAC agrees with the proposed program reductions for fiscal year 22, but respectfully, we request that the General Assembly reconsider recommending that MCSS administer the funds. The IAC and MCSS have been discussing and coordinating our two programs for some time, with the goal of aligning operational expenditures towards the Maryland Center for School Safety and capital expenditures towards the IAC's funding. This is being done to reduce the overlap between our programs and keep capital type programs associated with the IAC, where we try to link things together for the greatest benefit of the long-lasting building. Regarding the recommendations that the IAC modify its statewide contingency account report, the IAC will make these suggested modifications, and we stand for questions.
Are there any questions for this panel? Senate President Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for letting me jump in here and join you all for a minute. I'm curious whether it was the IAC's position or the State Board of Education's position to recommend or request a zeroing out of the Healthy School Facilities Initiative.
The request is one that has come through the IAC as staff, and as we work along course with the Department of Budget and Administration. Kim, can you fill in any details on that question? If not, we can get back to you.
I wasn't quite clear when you said zeroing out the Healthy School Facility fund.
I believe it drops from 30 million to 0 for FY22.
So, yes, for FY 2022, the program was set to sunset in FY 21 initially. The program continues based on House Bill 1, and that was just recently enacted from legislative session 2020.
And
So it wasn't funded yet.
The bill to learn other additional funding categories, if I'm correct, were funded as though they were continued through House Bill 1, the Bill to Learn Act. The Healthy School Facilities was not. Is that correct?
So you are correct that the Healthy School Facility Fund did not get funded, but the Bill to Learn Act didn't pass in time to include FY 2022 funding.
But the dollars were included as though it were. Is that correct?
I don't believe so, but we can get back and confirm that with you.
I guess the ultimate question is it the department's position to stop the funding of that fund?
No, it isn't. In fact, we have future projects, I think, that will depend on those funds. Let's see. But I would like to be able to go back, look at all this, put it in writing so that we are very clear on what we think we know.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Looks like Chair McIntosh has a question.
Yeah, just following up on the President's Senate's question. He is correct that there was a substantial amount of, as a matter of fact, I think it was over $500 million put in the budget this year for Build to Learn, for schools to start who are in that or can access that money to actually start as soon as possible accessing that money. But Healthy Schools Act was not included, nor was about $30 million of our regular IAC program. So, you know, from my vantage point, when I add up the numbers, we are short some $65 million in our regular program school construction. So I want to go back to last year, or actually FY21 Healthy Schools. Did I understand that you only spent half of the money last year in anticipation that you might have to cut the program?
So we had not sent out the applications or the procedures in order to receive applications for that program. The FY 2020 $30 million is about half expended, but it was fully allocated initially. And then there's about 4.3 remaining from that would be recycled with the FY 2021 allocation during this next application period for that program. And I guess when we talk about the funding, I think of it as separate funding programs for the Healthy School Facility Fund that's separate from the capital improvement program, public school construction funding that is at $250 this year as part of the capital budget. And so, which is a little bit less than it had previously been.
Correct. And it's less than what was called for in Build to Learn. But let me
Yes.
go back to what you just said. So allocated was $30 million in healthy schools. You spent about half of it. Correct? 15 million.
So I am speaking of the FY 2020 initial funding for that
Yes.
program. Yes, for FY 2021, the 30 million is still available to be allocated to specific projects. We haven't actually received applications for that funding yet. That was, as Laura had mentioned in her analysis, that we are intending to do that over the next few months.
But I'm trying to get the difference between about half of 30 million was held and you only have 4 million to recycle. What happened to the 9 million if I do the subtraction?
Again, the FY 2020, there's about 4.3 million that was not expended for the projects it was initially allocated to. And the other half is still pending reimbursement when I speak of expenditures. When we're talking about the FY 2021, there is still 30 million that is to be allocated to specific projects through an application process. So that's available.
Okay.
Okay.
And that you will expend all 3 million.
I'm sorry, you broke up a minute there.
Depending on getting the applications for that amount, yes.
Yes, it's our intention when we provide the amount that's available, we typically utilize funds from prior authorizations that are available. So in essence, we will have 34 million for FY 2021's application process.
Got it.
That is likely the expenditures will occur during fiscal 2022, but from the 2021 appropriation.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have actually a follow-up question. Why is it taking so long to take applications for 21? Why are we nearly through 21 and we haven't gotten any applications?
We were uncertain of the funding. This was general fund backed program, and we were uncertain of the availability of the funding. Did not want to get projects started and then end up not being able to provide the reimbursements or even the actual dollars to start the projects.
So we have 21 money the General Assembly allocated that you were uncertain of, that you have delayed. And then you have 22 money that you've completely zeroed out because we haven't made you spend it. Is that basically what's happened?
I wouldn't characterize it as that, no. But
Well, that's what I'm hearing from Kim. She said the program sunset and the bill was vetoed and it wasn't overridden until the 22 budget came out, which is really just saying you guys hadn't made us do it. So it's clearly not your priority, but we will make sure that the General Assembly, and as you can see with the chair and the Senate President, are extremely concerned about this program.
Understood.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any other questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the budget hearing on public school construction. I'll now turn it over to Chair Peters to present the next budget.
Thank you, members.
Vice Chair Zucker. Sorry, I had a bill hearing. We have a number of groups on the agenda that have given us written testimony. So just so you know, we're going to skip down all the way to the University System of Maryland. And Ian is our analyst. And Ian, if you could hit the high points, we did get their written testimony and the areas where they're in disagreement. Thanks.
Overall, the fiscal 2022 budget provides System Office with $4.8 million in GO bonds to finish the construction of the third academic building at the University System of Maryland at Southern Maryland.
Just a moment before we move on, Chair, I'm so
Sure.
sorry, but we do have some witnesses signed up. Diana Bergman.
I just saw that. I didn't. I don't have that list, but Diana Bergman, I guess first. This is for the school construction still, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Chair Peters.
Everybody, sorry about that. I had some shared concerns. My name is Diana Bergman. I'm an advocate in Baltimore County, and I've been advocating since 2016 regarding our facilities conditions for our public schools. I have a lot of concerns regarding what has happened regarding our capital budget for school facilities. And some of the concerns I have our senator and Delegate McIntosh had shared with us some of those concerns, but I have concerns about the capital budget regarding our enrollment projections. That is something that we're not talking about. And due to COVID, our enrollment projections of what we had predicted previously have changed tremendously. We're seeing a lot of mobility where people's work environment has changed, where they could telework and now they can move and live in different parts of the country. So we don't have an accurate picture of what our actual enrollment projections are when it comes to school construction. I am very concerned regarding the Healthy School Facilities Fund, because as we know, we're more cautious now about the health and the air quality, and not just the drinking water too, that we, regarding our children. I mean, I carried a basket of questionable drinking water throughout Annapolis. I shared that with the comptroller and many on the Maryland General Assembly. The drinking quality of what our children not just drink impacts their ability to access their education, and also the air quality they breathe. My youngest, when he was in second grade, he was in an aging school facility, and he missed 23 days in one quarter due to allergic reaction to some kind of mold in that school. The school was knocked down, it was replaced. But are we thinking about if we're using our money wisely? And do we have to reevaluate some of the measures that we're taking when it comes to our capital budget yearly? I mean, shouldn't we have like a new standard of what we're looking at with these school facility buildings and how we utilize them? Because education has changed. You guys voted and passed the blueprint. So our expectation of how we use the learning environment is very different than we've used in the past. So my question is, do we have enough money to make sure we use the money wisely to make our school buildings healthy and safe, but also that we don't waste our money on how we plan projects? Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
The link that went out for teen.
Next we have Garrett O'Day. Garrett.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can, if you could just kind of summarize in a minute or so.
Sure thing. Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, thank you. For the record, Garrett O'Day, Deputy Director of Maryland Catholic Conference, and I'm here on behalf of about 50,000 students in Maryland's Catholic schools, as well as with Rabbi Sadwin, representing the Non-Public School Coalition, representing about 1 in 9 students in Maryland who attend our non-public schools. So on behalf of the 180 plus schools, we just want to say thanks for the Aging Schools Program, which is a legacy item for your former colleague, Senator DeGrange, and the Safety Improvements Program, which helps to make schools safety for our students a priority. So I'd also like to thank Dr. Salmon for their administration of the program. Just in wrapping up, I'll say that the majority of our students in non-public schools are lower and middle income, and there's tens of thousands of students that benefit from these programs. And their days are made safer, healthier, and more productive through these small but meaningful programs that are so popular with the principals. And of course, we've had in this time about 4 Catholic schools statewide close, and our lower income students, especially in our African-American community, predominantly low-income African-American students in our community schools in Baltimore City and our Latino communities, heavily concentrated in the 4 largest districts, very much need these funds, and we thank you for your continued support of them.
Okay, any questions for Garrett? Garrett, thank you very much. Chena Sadwin from Maryland Cape.
Hi, Mr. Chair. That's probably my error in the way I submitted the online testimony, but I would be the one who'd be Rabbi Ariel Sadwin from Agudath Israel, Maryland, and Maryland Cape. So as to not take any more time for this, I will say ditto from what Mr. O'Day said, and I thank you for your continued support on behalf of the non-public schools in Maryland, and I wish you all the very best.
Great testimony. Thank you, sir. Okay, I think that's all the testimony I have. Does that sound right? The rest looks like it's written. Okay. So Ian, we'll go back to you again. Sorry. Thank you all from the public construction.
No problem. Okay.
Versus,
Okay. Coming back to System Office's presentation, as it shows on the cover page here, the fiscal 2022 budget provides $4.8 million in GO bonds to finish the construction of the third academic building at the University System of Maryland at Southern Maryland, or USMSM, as well as $25 million in academic revenue bonds, or ARBs, for capital facilities renewal for the Capital Facilities Renewal Program to fund various projects at the respective USM institutions. Turning to the overall backlog, facilities renewal backlog, which is shown in Exhibit 1 on page 4. The USM backlog in fiscal 2020 was $2.3 billion, with College Park and UMB accounting for 62% of this total. USM has a multi-pronged approach to deal with this backlog, including institutions spending operating and capital funds on facility renewal projects, utilizing plant funds on renewal projects, and funding renewal projects in the CIP through the Capital Facilities Renewal Program. Exhibit 2 on page 5 shows the total operating and capital spending on facility renewal programs compared to the 2% replacement spending target. From 2017 to 2019, total spending on facilities renewal was growing and getting closer to the 2% target. However, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, institutions reduced their fiscal 2020 facility renewal spending as a cost savings measure. But as a consequence of this reduction, there has been a growing gap between the institution's spending and meeting the 2% target. The Chancellor should comment on how USM will deal with the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on facilities renewal spending, while also being attentive to the growing gap between the 2% spending target and the institutional spending on facilities renewal. Moving to the budget overview, the first item is for the third academic building at USMSM. Funding in fiscal 2022 totals $4.8 million in GO bonds and goes toward construction and equipping costs for the facility. This is a project that has been in the CIP for several years and is being constructed to add needed classroom, lab, research, conference, and electrical engineering space, as shown on pages 7 and 8. The second item in the capital improvement program is found on the bottom of page 8, and this is for $25 million in ARBs for the facility renewal program. As shown in Exhibit 3 on page 9, USM had shifted from utilizing GO bond funding in the 2020 CIP to rely on ARBs and plant funds. This represented a shift in how this program was to be funded. In previous CIPs, revenue bonds were supplemented with GO bonds for various capital facility renewal projects. In fiscal 2021, USM had planned to spend $16.4 million in plant funds for facility renewal projects. However, as a consequence of the pandemic, these funds were not expended. The 2021 CIP represents a shift back to utilizing GO bond funding as well as ARBs and plant funds, with $25 million in ARBs planned for fiscal 2022. A summary of how USM utilizes plant funding is found on page 10. Also included in the budget is a deficiency appropriation of $21.2 million for capital maintenance projects to help USM backfill for projects that could not be funded as a result of the cost-saving measures adopted due to the pandemic. The distribution of funding is provided in Exhibit 4 on page 11. The Chancellor should comment on how institutions plan to manage facility renewal needs during the pandemic and how institutional spending on facility renewal will be replaced. The DLS recommended actions are found on page 13. And that is to approve funding for the USMSM third academic building and for the Capital Facilities Renewal Program. This concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Ian? I do not see any. Thank you, Ian. Dr. Perman, are you here with us? Got to take yourself off of mute. There we go.
Yes, I am.
We're anxious to hear from you.
Thank you, Chairman Peters, Chairman Barnes, members of the subcommittees. I look around. It's good to see all of you. Wish we could see each other more often. And I thank you for this chance to testify on the governor's FY22 capital budget recommendations. I have here with me Ellen Herbst, our Vice Chancellor for Administration and Finance, Mark Beck, our Director for Capital Planning, and of course, Patrick Hogan, our Vice Chancellor for Governmental Relations. I'll keep the testimony brief and speak to the issues that were raised by Mr. Klein, whose work I always appreciate. But first, gratitude to the governor for his backing of our capital request, and to each of you for the support you generously provide the system over the years. At a time of enormous challenges, as reflected in the analysis, that kind of support is especially appreciated. As a system, we urge full funding of the governor's FY22 budget proposal, and we thank you for your consideration. The analyst has asked for comment on two items. First, how the system will deal with COVID's impact on facilities renewal spending while being attentive to the growing gap between institutional spending on renewal and the 2% target, 2% of the replacement value of our facilities. And secondly, how our institutions plan to manage their facility renewal needs during the pandemic. How's that lost spending on renewal then going to be replaced? Please let me offer you assurance that the system is acutely attentive to our facility needs in maintaining the health and safety of our students and our employees. And the pandemic has only intensified this attention. And I've been impressed in this first year of the privilege I have to be chancellor. I've been impressed with the speed and agility our institutions have shown in making changes to their physical plants in response to COVID. I've walked the campuses. I've walked 5 or 6 of the campuses, our residential campuses. I am impressed. Part of this response has been financial, in that our institutions have deferred cash-funded facility spending, except for those projects that are ongoing and those that have a short-term public safety impact. It's true that the uncertainty surrounding this year's budget, as well as uncertainty about future revenues, has temporarily slowed growth in our facility renewal expenditures. As the analyst noted, from FY17 to FY19, total spending on facilities renewal had grown over that period by 35%, $50 million, topping out at $193 million in FY19. FY20 showed a slight reduction from that FY19 high. We were at 181 million. The budgeted figure for FY21 is 121 million. Given the COVID-induced need to reduce expenses, we temporarily modified our renewal spending guidelines, allowing institutions to eliminate the planned increase in FY21 spending. Institutions were also allowed a one-time only 50% cut to the remaining facilities renewal balance, and renewal levels next fiscal year are to be brought back to this year's base number. Now, none of this is ideal, but these actions have actually helped preserve our bond rating in a time, I would share with the committees, as you know, that higher education is on a negative outlook. Our bond ratings and the ratings agencies labeled us as stable. So these actions helped us in this regard and yielded new confidence in our ability as the USM to protect our financial strength. Well before the pandemic, the USM regions affirmed their interest in protecting and maintaining the system's existing physical assets. I know that over the 10 years I came before you in my previous role as UMB president, I always emphasized the commitment to taking care of what we have, taking care of what the public and you have given us. And believe me, it remains my top priority in this area as it relates to our capital program. And yes, while our momentum has necessarily slowed, our focus as a system has not changed. So as soon as we can, we'll restore our full commitment to our renewal work. And we look forward to the state's support of that work in our capital and in our operating budgets. Mr. Chair, before I conclude, and because it was highlighted, the University System of Maryland at Southern Maryland, let me thank you all for your commitment to the new academic and research building at USMSM. It's on schedule for completion this fall. I mentioned to you that despite the pandemic, I was fortunate enough to get around a little bit. And I was fortunate to be able to visit the Southern Maryland campus last summer, see the construction firsthand. The steel was up. I had the chance to talk to the construction workers, to talk to our folks down there. And I would share with you that it's a building that will add immeasurably to the regional center's teaching mission and research mission. The teaching mission, right now, I would point out that the Southern Maryland region has a bachelor's degree completion rate of 18%. So here's the mismatch. About 30% of the jobs in the area require at least a 4-year degree, and not just in tech fields, business, education, social work. We have a new center director, Dr. Eileen Abel, who is working closely with the College of Southern Maryland to get students into that post-secondary pipeline and offer residents work-based training that leads to those high-demand, high-paying jobs. So having the added classroom space that Mr. Klein mentioned to enroll more local learners, especially underserved, underrepresented students, that's critically important. And then on the research side, as you all know, the Pax River Naval Air Station near the campus is one of the Navy's leading centers for unmanned aircraft development and testing. But a lot of that R&D goes on behind the fence, behind the gate, as it were. So it's difficult for researchers without authorization to work on Pax River projects. So please imagine then a facility on our side of the fence that's a hub for collaboration with the Navy and with researchers around the world who want to work with us on unmanned systems R&D. I saw the shell space, the high base space in the building that will allow researchers to fly the aircraft indoors, test them on land, and even in water using a special tank. The research conducted in this building will work hand in glove with College Park's unmanned aircraft system test site, which is just down the road from the USMSM campus. And together, that work is going to solidify our leadership as a state, our system in these unmanned aircraft systems. It'll bring together some of the country's best university and agency-based people developing the latest unmanned aircraft system technology and policy. I would share with you that, in my view, it's an exciting time for Southern Maryland. Thank you for indulging me in talking about that particular project. Mr. Chair, this concludes my testimony. Obviously, my colleagues and I are happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chancellor. Are there any questions for the Chancellor? Seeing none, we appreciate you coming out and testifying today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, next, we'll go to Department of Juvenile Services. Nick, if you could give us a brief briefing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let me share my screen. Okay, so fiscal 2022 capital budget for the Department of Juvenile Services. There are two projects in the budget this year. The first is the new female detention center in Prince George's County, and the second is the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center, an education expansion on that facility. And the total in the 2022 budget is just below $26 million. Jumping to the first project, the new female detention center, the budget receives $23 million to complete the design phase of this project and to begin the construction phase of this project. There'll be a 48-bed detention center on the site of the recently finished Cheltenham Youth Facility. And the programming offered in this new female detention center would consolidate services that are currently offered in the Noyce Children's Center and the Waxter Center in Montgomery and Anne Arundel counties. The programming would continue to provide the normal array of services to these female youth, but would also have gender-specific services such as women's health services as well. The project scope has been expanded quite considerably since this project was first proposed in the CIP several years back. And the scope now includes the construction of a combined service and storage facility, as well as the demolition of several vacant facilities on the Cheltenham property. And so as a result, the scope increase has a corresponding increase in the project cost compared to when the facility was first proposed. And the total project cost is $95.3 million, and construction is expected to conclude in January of 2024. The second project is the education expansion for the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center. This project has not received funding since fiscal 2018. And again, this is due to several design changes since the project was initially proposed by the department. The new facility is currently scoped to expand on the current BCJJC and maintain the same secured perimeter, but expand into an adjacent parking lot to provide additional education facilities to comply with MSDE regulations, as well as to provide expansion to the administrative services. And the total project cost is $10.7 million, and the project is expected to finish construction in April of 2023. There is one project that has been removed from the CIP this year, and that is the previously proposed 24-bed expansion to the Cheltenham Youth Treatment Center. And the department is reevaluating the need for this project due to significant declines in their residential population that has been occurring for the better part of the past decade. There are also a handful of pre-authorizations for the two projects in the CIP this year. The new female detention center receives pre-authorizations in 2023 and 2024 to provide the necessary cash flow to secure construction contracts for this project. And the same for the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center. It receives a pre-authorization in 2023 to provide the necessary cash flow. Our GO bond recommendations are summarized at the end of the analysis, and that's to approve the authorization of GO bonds for BCJJC for fiscal 2022, approve the authorization for GO bonds for the new female detention center, and approve the pre-authorization for BCJJC in fiscal 2023, the pre-authorization in fiscal 2023 and in 2024 for the new female detention center. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, are there any questions for Nicholas? I do not see any. Thank you very much for that thorough analysis. Secretary of Ed. You're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chairman and members of the joint committees. Sam Abbott, Secretary for the Department of Juvenile Services. I'd also like to thank Nick Conselman for his, as usual, his excellent analysis of the department's budget. There were 5 recommended actions in the analysis, and DJS concurs with all of the recommended actions. We were asked to comment on the programming provided at Silver Oak Academy and whether Youth House there could be accommodated at other state-operated facilities. The short answer is yes, we could accommodate those youth, but if we singled out any individual program, any private provider, and did that same analysis, we could accommodate those youth as well. The issue that we have sort of looking at programs individually is that we really have to look at them together as a continuum, because they form a continuum of services for our kids. And we need that continuum to have diversity, of course, across the state, but also diversity of programming, diversity of security levels, and so forth. And so Silver Oak, like many of our other private providers, has over the years had to change the way they do business in order to serve the changing population that we serve at the department. All of our programs, all of our private providers have to do that. And for us, while their numbers are low, if we look across the system, all of our numbers are low at this point. And it's important to the health of our system to maintain a strong continuum of services. And then the last thing I would just say about that is that it is a per diem provider. And so we only pay for the services that we use. We only pay for beds that we utilize. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions for the secretary? Do not see any. Thank you for coming out and testifying.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, now we are to our miscellaneous grant programs. I have Marva Jo Camp. Marva Jo, are you here with us?
I am.
How are you?
Peters, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You can go ahead and give us your 2 minutes of fame.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Marva Jo Camp, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center. I am joined by Board Chair Chanel Compton. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this afternoon in support of the capital budget request of $500,000. Before I begin my brief remarks, I would like to thank Governor Hogan for his ongoing support of the arts and for including the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center in his proposed budget. I would also like to say what an incredible honor and privilege it is to appear before the esteemed Capital Budget Subcommittee Chair Douglas Peters and Appropriations Subcommittee Chair Ben Barnes, and would also like to recognize Prince George's Budget and Tax Senators Melanie Griffith and James Rosenpap, and Appropriation Delegate Susie Proctor, Jazz Lewis, and Geraldine Valentino Smith. Let me also say a special thank you to Senator Malcolm Augustine and Delegate Diana Fennell for being stalwart supporters of the museum's expansion effort. I've worked with each of you and have also seen firsthand your commitment and credible representation of Prince George's County and your commitment to supporting institutions like ours that help to improve the quality of life for Prince George's residents. We have provided written testimony that outlines the vision, budget, phasing, and funding for the museum expansion and addition of affordable artist housing. Heeding wise counsel, to be brief, I would like to highlight a few points. The museum has played an invaluable role in the preservation and presentation of the story of African Americans and the African American community, so much so that we are now busting at the seams, with stakeholders wanting more exhibits, more programming, and more educational offerings, particularly for our young people. The museum has also played an invaluable role during the pandemic at a time when people want to feel good and have ways to feel less stressed. It is critically important that we continue to have an institution that celebrates the rich and diverse history, heritage, arts, and culture of African American community. Indeed, at a time when the world is talking about racial equity and the importance of understanding the history of African American experience, the need for the museum has never been greater. We understand DLS had a position based on the absence of a funding plan. We have addressed this funding concern through our written testimony. However, I want you to know that expanding the museum is a priority for the county, and support for the expansion is strong and unwavering at every level: county government, corporations, foundations, and most importantly, the community. This support was made abundantly clear during a 2-year stakeholder process that was comprehensive and inclusive. I also want to assure you that we have developed a funding plan that will allow the museum to meet its funding goals, including the hiring of a fund development consultant and convening a capital funding committee. I will conclude by saying the museum happened because of a yearning and vision of so many who understood the importance of documenting the African American experience. The original vision could not have been achieved without the incredible support of this august body. We humbly ask that you retain the proposed $500,000 so that we can ensure the ability of the Prince George's African American Museum and Cultural Center to tell the story of the African American experience in Prince George's County. Thank you again for the opportunity to present before you today.
That was phenomenal testimony. We're going to journalize it, I think.
You're very funny, Senator Peters, but thank you. I really do appreciate that opportunity.
Wait, I see a hand up. Don't you leave, Marva Jo. We got a hand up from Senator Griffith.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, I just would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my phenomenal constituent, Marva Jo Camp. After she showered all the Prince George's members with love, I felt like I needed to give her a little back and to thank Ms. Compton. They're doing a phenomenal job telling our story. And so we really appreciate their work. And I know Delegate Proctor, I worked very closely with the former delegate, the previous Delegate Proctor, and the members that Marva Jo Camp just named. And so this is an important project, and pleased to see the governor put it in his budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Let me add, Marva Jo, this is Ben Barnes. I just want to also say hello, and on behalf of all the Prince Georgians and the House side, thanks for all the work you've done in our county over the years. It's great to hear from you today.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right. You are loved. Thank you very much for all your volunteer work.
Thank you. And it's a labor of love. So thank you very much.
Okay, Matt.
Mr. Chair, Senator McCray is waving.
What's that?
Senator McCray is waving. And has
wait a minute. Are you going to talk about Marva Jo again?
I was going to talk about Miss Marva Jo and Chanel Compton. They was getting all that Prince George's love, and I just know that Baltimore City love them too.
And we love Baltimore City back.
Amen.
He loves us more.
You need to get a camera, Marva Jo. We can't see you. So next time you get a camera, okay? Oh, okay. There we go. All right. Okay. I think that's all the love that's out here for you, Marva Jo. So I think we're good. All right. Okay, Matt. I think I only have one other person signed up, maybe not. I've marked Lerzer, but I don't see him on the screen unless there's some other people that want to testify on the miscellaneous.
Chair, I believe we have David Gordon, Sarah Mickey,
okay,
and Martha Nathanson.
Okay, who do we have? I'm sorry.
David Gordon.
Right, and who else?
Maryland State Fair, Sarah Mickey with the Baltimore Jewish Council, and Martha Nathanson with.
Okay, well, I did go a little bit out of order, Matt. Did you have anything you wanted to say or any words of wisdom?
Well, depends on whether or not you want to hear me talk about any of these projects, or do you just want to hear from the grantees where we've made recommendations? That is completely up to you at this point. I'd be happy to walk through the document very briefly, or you can just skip directly to the grantees where we've made recommendations. That's strictly up to you.
Okay, if we go to the grantees? I promise we'll read what you wrote. Okay.
I'll test you on it later.
That's fine. And you can test Chairman Barnes on it. All right, so let's go to David Gordon. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and subcommittee members. My name is David Gordon. I'm the Assistant General Manager for your Maryland State Fair. And while the fair is indeed thankful for any funding approved in the capital budget, we would request that the full $500,000 requested be restored. Maryland State Fair is a 501c3 volunteer-led nonprofit. Concern was raised over county support, and while the property is located in Baltimore County, we do receive county support through waiver of our property tax, and the county provides police and fire services throughout the year. However, we are the Maryland State Fair and belong to all the citizens of Maryland. It's interesting that we're requesting $500,000 because in 1950, when the fairgrounds was being sold, Marylanders from one end of the state to the other banded together to raise that very amount to save the property. The fair's been in existence for 142 years and is only closed once during World War II when the Army took over the fairgrounds as a staging base. Then, as now, the fair is committed to the service of Maryland. During the coronavirus pandemic, the State Fair has served Marylanders as the first location in all of Maryland to offer free coronavirus testing without a doctor's note or appointment. We've hosted food pop-ups and food drives for the community. We've hosted American Red Cross emergency blood drives. We've offered 600 stalls to the Maryland Department of Agriculture for emergency animal housing, and we're now a large-scale coronavirus vaccination site. The State Fair also hosts emergency storm crews, state police events, first responders, veterans organizations, school children, and more than 10,000 youth playing sports. The $500,000 requested is to upgrade the grandstand and community center by adding an ADA-compliant elevator and encapsulating lead paint with a permanent ceiling on the second level of the structure. Without the full funding, the fair would have to eliminate projects or pick and choose between these needed safety improvements. Again, we appreciate any support, but request the full funding be restored so we can make these much needed improvements and continue to expand our efforts to serve all of Maryland. Thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Gordon? Okay, thank you. Thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we said Sarah Mursky.
Yes, thank you, Chair Barnes and Peters and members of the subcommittee. I'm Sarah Mursky-Mickey, Deputy Director of the Baltimore Jewish Council, which represents the Associated Jewish Community Federation of Baltimore and all of its agencies and programs. I'm here today to urge the committee to reject DLS's recommended cut of the Sinai Primary and Specialty Care Complex's $1 million allocation. This is the last request we have for this project, and we've previously received $5 million from the state. The complex, which is to be built as part of the Pimlico redevelopment plan, will concentrate on primary and chronic care services and testing, as well as other specialty and subspecialty care in one area of the campus, providing easier access for patients to all these levels of care. This complex is a much needed improvement to the greater Baltimore and especially greater Park Heights community. The Sinai complex building has undergone several changes over the past few years due to outside circumstances, including waiting for the Pimlico study to be completed, causing the first major delay. And the second, of course, has been COVID, where all ongoing capital projects were frozen for a year in order for Sinai to focus on capital improvements that were related to the COVID needs. Sinai has already selected the engineer for the project, and the construction bid is estimated for September of this year, with construction slated to begin in estimated December 2022. As you can see, we are ready to go and therefore ask for funding to be kept in the budget as proposed and reject DLS's cut. Martha Nathanson from LifeBridge Health is also here to answer any technical questions. Thank you.
Okay, Martha, do you want to testify or just here to answer questions?
Just here to answer questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, are there any questions for Sarah or Martha? Do not see any. Thank you guys for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. The reason I'm a little confused is because all the names are here and it all says written. Nobody says oral, so I'm assuming that they are not speaking, but are there any other people out there that are on the list here that?
That's everyone we have that was on, that's on the agenda.
Yes, okay, very good. Okay, all right, I think that's it for us today. Thank the group. Sorry I was late, I had a bill hearing, but thanks Craig for taking over. All right, Chairman Barnes, you have any final words? Is this our last meeting?
This is it. This is it. Ready to make decisions.
All right, so we get paid to do, right? Okay.
Yes, sir. Good work, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Nothing further over here.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see.